Let us wander into the darkness of the unknown with the story Dearg Dul by D.J Doyles. 3 days ago, my life was normal. I got up, went to work, came home, ate dinner, and cuddled with my heavily pregnant wife. Now? Well, now my world has crumbled all around me and my life a mess. No, a torment. 3 nights ago, my wife, my college sweetheart, went into early labour. It was the middle of the night when I awoke to her screams coming from the bathroom. I leapt from the bed and raced to her. My heart skipped 100 beats. I found her on the floor, in a pool of blood, crying for our baby's life. It took 20 minutes for the ambulance to arrive. By then, contractions had started and they were 7 minutes apart. My wife, Diane, was rushed through for surgery by a large team of doctors and nurses. A blood-soaked nightgown was the last image I saw before she disappeared through the double doors. It haunted me every minute. They wouldn't let me in to be with her. She must have been so afraid. I paced the corridors for 3 hours. Tears stained my cheeks and snot gathered on my sleeves. Finally, a nurse poked her head out and told me to go to the waiting room for the doctor, who would be with me in a minute. As I sat, my knees trembled uncontrollably. I heard the handle turning and jumped to attention. I must have looked a mess. Teary eyes, runny nose, with a shorts and t-shirt combo. Mr. Campbell, I'm truly sorry. I don't know how to tell you this. He fiddled with his pen and stood open mouthed. Just spit it out. Is it our baby? Did he not make it? It's more complicated than that. Your wife had internal bleeding and a high fever. There were complications with the delivery, and your baby was too long without oxygen. He put his hand on my shoulder and looked me straight in the eyes. I'm sorry, Mr. Campbell. Both your wife and baby didn't make it. What? No, this can't be happening. This is some sort of nightmare, I said as I swiped his arm away. I didn't want his sympathy. I wanted to see my family. They allowed me to see them once they had cleaned them up. My darling Diane, my little Even. They looked asleep, but when I touched their skin, I could tell there was no life in them. They were cold to the touch. It was then my world began to fade away in front of my eyes, and my soul left blank. Nothing. Empty. I watched the mahogany box, which contained my future, be lowered into the 6-foot deep abyss. 2 empty vessels, one cradling the other, sealed away for eternity. Family and friends left, comforting one another, to the wake in our local public house, one we hadn't visited in a year or so. Not since we were trying to have a family. It was just me, the corpses, and the descending sun at the graveyard. I fell to the ground and rested my head on the soft grass beside the deep hole. I asked them to wait until tomorrow to fill it in. I wanted to be as close to Diane and little Even for as long as I could. I stayed until dark and fell asleep. Hours later, I awoke with the sound of a voice singing. A soft melodic tone that I pictured dancing with the dust in the cool breeze. I opened my eyes and eerily realised the dim light of the moon had cast a glow on the headstones and monuments in the cemetery. In between a row of recently deceased, not too far away, stood a woman dressed in a white gown which appeared old and raggy. Her dark hair was long and silky with a tattered white flower crown. It was as if she floated towards me. "I feel your pain," she whispered. "What? You wouldn't understand." "I have lost love before. I have lost children too. I do feel your pain." Her voice carried a soothing tone that made my bottom lip quiver and tears flow from my eyes. "I can reunite you, if you want," she stated. "If only that were possible." I sat up and stared at this mysterious woman who believed she could bring back the dead. "It is. I can make it possible. For you." "Are you a witch?" I asked with a sarcastic tone. "Ha! Don't insult me. I am much more than that. I'm a friend of death. I can control it. Don't you want to see them again?" Visions of Diane with her large stomach painting Evan's room together last month invaded my thoughts. She flicked the bristles of the brush at me and screamed, laughing when I came towards her with a roller full of paint. She begged me not to paint her. When I put the roller behind me, she shoved the paintbrush into my face and wiggled before bursting out laughing and apologising. I let her get away with it because of her condition. Otherwise, I would have chased her around the house until she was covered head to toe with the blue-covered paint. An owl hooted close by and brought me to my senses. "Who or what are you?" "I am a Dearg Dul, and all I ask is for one kiss, and I can reunite you with your family." I had no idea what a Dearg Dul was, yet the name seemed familiar in the back of my mind. Although she was mesmerising, I had just lost the love of my life. "My wife is just there. Why would you expect me to kiss you?" She started to sing again. The song was different from the last one. The one before sounded like a song of woe. This one of enchantment, with a melody that enticed my senses and made me forget my emotional state. My sadness, my grief, the feeling of being lost in this world. What is that song? It is an old song to give comfort to grieving souls. Did it work? Yes, I would love to forget my pain, but a song doesn't last forever. This one can. You don't have to be in pain. Come kiss me and you will see, she said seductively. Her tale of forgotten pain was too enticing. It still doesn't feel right for me to kiss you with my wife and child in the mud. Do not wallow in pity. Let me kiss you, and you will not have any guilt. She came closer and lifted her hand towards my face. Her sky blue eyes flickered in the moonlight. They were practically glowing. The touch from her pale hand was cold yet soothing. What if she could unite me with my wife and son? Wasn't it worth the risk? I would do anything to hold them in my arms. She spun me around and swayed side to side as she hummed another song. We were dancing. I felt like I was moving on a cloud. Her pale pink lips closed in. I closed my eyes and smelt her aroma. Her breath burnt my nose like hot chili. When our lips touched, I had an out-of-body experience, but not a typical one. I was back in school and we were learning about Samhain and Halloween tradition. My teacher listed out characters from Irish folklore, and the Dearg Dul was one of them. What was it about the Dearg Dul? Dearg. Was it a colour? Yes, that's it. The colour, red, for blood. My body quivered as her lips moved across my face and onto my neck, still kissing the stubble. I didn't feel her teeth sink in at first, not until she started to suck my blood. Then I felt it like the very essence of my soul was being drained from my body. I screamed, but as she drank my blood and moaned with delight, my voice grew weaker and weaker until a little gurgle came out. My skin turned a pale grey, and the other layers crinkled, yet she continued to feast upon me. Black and white spots appeared in front of my eyes, and then everything went dark. I opened my eyes again to see my wife and baby smiling at me, with a bright light behind them. They looked angelic and perfect. I returned a smile, as I never felt happier in my life, and reached for her hand. Diane's face changed. Her brows lifted in shock, and she turned to shield her and Even. A dark force grabbed me. Its touch burnt my skin, and it tugged me away from the arms of my love. I turned to see a beast with fire in his eyes and an evil grin. It growled and pulled me into a black rift. Beyond were the depths of hell. The last sound I heard was the Dearg Dul laughing at my tortured soul. Let us have a brief break and listen to a bit more of Indust before we continue our short story segment with Rednecks Shouldn't Play with Dead Things by Scott M. Baker. Rednecks Shouldn't Play with Dead Things by Scott M. Baker. It sure is quiet out here, bellowed Ike in his normal boisterous voice. Haven't heard or seen a critter in a couple of hours. Maybe you scared them away by flapping that damn mouth of yours, chided Brian. We've been out here all morning and ain't seen nothing bigger than a squirrel. It ain't natural for these parts, not during hunting season. Buck spit a mouthful of Redmond into the campfire. The wad sizzled when it hit the flames. Maybe the animals are smarter than we think. Ike's right, agreed Ned. It's too quiet. Shit, man, David added. Kinda creepy if you ask me. Johnny huffed. You got a problem? Ned asked. You guys are such wimps. Scared of a little dark? Ned finished his Miller and tossed the empty can on the fire. Grow a pair. Like you? Brian asked. Yeah. If you're so brave, why did you bring that along? Brian pointed to the clearing where the group had parked their pickups. The truck closest to the campsite was Ned's Dodge Ram, with a trailer attachment. On the trailer sat a John Deere Series 2000 tractor. No reason. Ned became sullen and avoided eye contact with the others. What's going on? Sam asked. Brian motioned towards Ned. Captain Courageous here has no fear. His wife, since she'd never let him agree to go hunting, he hitched up the tractor and told his wife some bullshit story about taking it into town for repairs. Come on, Ned said defensively. You know what she's like. From somewhere around the campfire, one of them clucked like a chicken, generating a chorus of laughs at Ned's expense. Ned responded by flipping them his middle finger, which only made them laugh harder. Sam Grodin smiled as he raised a can of Miller to his lips. He appreciated more than ever being back amongst his friends. These guys were his best friends, some of them going back as far as elementary school. They looked up to Sam, because he was the only one to have ever gotten out of their little town in the northwest Pennsylvania and make something of himself, even if it meant going to Iraq to do it. He had served 2 tours in Baghdad and would still be there if an IED had not left him deaf in one ear and with a limp in his left leg. None of that mattered though. He was home. Someone broke through the woods 30 yards away, shattering the calm with a terrified gasp. It happened so suddenly, Sam dropped his can of Miller, dousing his jacket in beer. The intruder staggered towards the campsite. Everyone jumped up and looked at each other, not sure how to respond. Brian reached down and picked up his Remington shotgun. When the intruder came close enough to be lit by the campfire, they all took a step back. Shit, man, what the hell happened to him? The intruder wore a blue flannel shirt, torn in several places and soaked in blood from a gaping wound in his throat. Given the extent of the wound and the loss of blood, it seemed amazing that the intruder was still alive. He sprinted towards them, stumbled and fell to the ground by the campfire. No one went to help him. With incredible effort, the intruder rolled over onto his back and stared up at the group. He gurgled his words a few at a time, pausing frequently to gasp for air through his ravaged throat. Please, Help me. Brian knelt down beside him. What happened, buddy? We gotta warn the town before it's too late. Warn the town about what? Must warn about the attack. What attacked you? The intruder took a deep breath and groaned. The dead. The deer? Ike looked at the others. What type of deer can do that? Buck spit out the wad of tobacco. He said the dead, you idiot. What the hell does he mean by that? Ned asked. Maybe he means them. Johnny pointed to the woods from where the intruder had stumbled. A figure stood at the tree line, staring at them through vacant yellow eyes. Even in the dim light of the campfire, Sam could see that something was horribly wrong. It wore a pair of rubber waders over a denim shirt. Like the intruder, its clothes were tattered and soaked in blood. Its skin was pale and waxy. Its right arm had been torn off just below the shoulder, the shattered bone sticking out from the gory stump. A gaping hole replaced its mouth, tattered flesh hanging from where it had chewed off its own lips, exposing teeth and gums. It paused for a second as its undead brain contemplated the line of men. Behind it, 5 other figures slowly emerged from out of the woods, each with the same pale, waxy appearance. A young woman in a jogging outfit stumbled forward, the top portion of its suit ripped off, exposing where the breasts and the flesh around its ribcage had been eaten away. A middle-aged man in a camis and a tan hunting vest stepped up beside her, tripping over its own intestines that hung out of a gash in its abdomen and dragged along the ground between its legs. 3 teenage boys in shredded mountain bike outfits, each one coated in a layer of mud and blood, brought up the rear. The first figure moaned, but not in pain. It almost sounded like a primitive command. The others responded with a growl and lumbered towards the hunters. A wad of tobacco fell out of Buck's gaping mouth and bounced off his shirt. You gotta be fucking kidding me. Shit, man, said David. It's just like one of them Cesar Romero movies. George, corrected Johnny. Huh? Cesar Romero played the Joker in Batman. George Romero made all them zombie movies. Shit, man, whatever. You know what this means? The others looked over to Brian as he pumped around into his shotgun. The hunt's back on, and now there are no limits. Maybe we should fall back and find a secure position. Screw that, there's only 6 of them. We don't know how many others there are. Don't go soft on me. I'm not. I just don't want to get killed. You won't if you shut up and do as I say, Brian spoke loud enough for them all to hear. Alright guys, take it slow and steady. Be sure to aim for the heads, just like in the movies. On my mark. Ready? Around him, Sam heard a chorus of rounds being chambered. Sam dropped to his left knee and squared his right leg to give him a more stable firing position. Aim! Sam raised his AR-15 and centered the sights on the first zombie's forehead. His finger wrapped around the trigger and pulled until he felt the tension. Sam took a deep breath and held it. Fire! The reports of 7 weapons being discharged thundered through the woods. A mist of blood and gore momentarily formed behind the zombies. The zombies stiffened in unison as the bullets tore through their skulls. For a moment, the undead stood there, teetering. Sam waited for them to topple over. Instead, they regained their footing and surged forward. Shit, man, we missed. We didn't miss. Brian practically mumbled the words, the confidence suddenly sucked out of him. Sam watched the undead draw closer. We need to fall back and secure our position. Shut up! Yelled Brian, snapping out of his shock. Ned, get over here! Despite his 300 pounds, Ned double-timed his position at the far left of the line. Brian pointed to the zombie in the rubber waders. Move closer and take that motherfucker down. Ned nodded and slowly approached the zombies. He pulled back the bolt of his Seco 85 Hunter, ejecting an empty cartridge, and pushed the bolt forward to load a live round into the chamber. When 10 yards from the wader zombie, Ned stopped, raised the rifle, aimed and fired. The bullet struck its mark, punching a hole in the zombie's brow an inch to the left of the first entry wound and blowing off the back of its skull. The zombie stumbled back, but regained its footing. A scowl distorted its already hideous face. It lurched forward, its dead eyes fixed on Ned. Lowering his rifle, Ned stared in disbelief, oblivious to the imminent danger. Ned! Called Brian. Get out of there! Snapped back to reality, Ned began to fall back, his eyes fixed on the approaching zombie. Failing to see the rock behind him, he tripped and fell backwards into the leaves. Most people could have quickly gotten up and escaped. At 300 pounds, Ned wallowed on the ground, a crippled animal waiting to be slaughtered. Sam raised his AR-15 and squeezed the trigger in rapid succession, emptying the entire magazine into the wader zombie's chest. A dozen bullets ripped into its torso, turning it into raw meat. Despite the onslaught, the zombie barely faltered. It closed to within a few feet of Ned. Raising his hands in front of him, Ned screamed as if terror would drive off the zombie. His screams turned into an agonized howl as the wader zombie dropped to its knees and sank its teeth into Ned's outreached arm. Within seconds, the 3 dirt biker zombies fell upon Ned, tearing off chunks of flesh which they stuffed into their mouths. The jogger and hunter zombies maneuvered around the feast, headed for the line of still living men. Buck dropped to his knees and vomited, puke mixing with his chewing tobacco. Shit, man. This is fucked, mumbled Johnny. What do we do now? Asked Ike, taking a few steps back. Brian remained silent, transfixed on watching his friend being eaten alive. Brian! Yelled Sam. That snapped Brian back to reality. Fall back! What about Ned? Sam asked. Brian raised his Remington and fired a single shot. Ned's head exploded, putting him out of his misery. Now move! Ike was paralysed with fear, but the sight of the undead swarming around and feasting on Ned galvanized him. He turned to run and slammed straight into a zombie that had closed in on him from behind. It wore a red flannel shirt and a bright orange vest stained with blood from where its neck and the left side of its face had been chewed off. The zombie grabbed Ike's head, holding it firmly between its decayed hands, and sunk its teeth into his face. Ike wailed as much from terror as from pain. The others heard Ike's death throes, but ignored them, for they had their own horrors to contend with. The moaning of the zombies to their front was now echoed from behind. Sam spun around and nearly wet himself. In addition to the zombie that attacked Ike, half a dozen others approached from the woods to their right rear, attracted by the noise. 2 more approached from off the dirt road, bumping their way in between the pickup trucks. The new zombies blocked their means of escape. "Shit, man." David's voice wavered on the brink of panic. "That's a fucking understatement," added Burke. "What do we do now?" Sam asked, looking to Brian for guidance. Brian said nothing. His eyes darted from one zombie to another, filled with fear and uncertainty. With each passing second wasted while waiting for a decision, the zombies drew closer. Brian's gaze focused on one zombie in particular, an overweight man naked from the waist up, the numerous chunks of flesh torn out of its chest. Brian's mouth quivered. He fell to his knees, whimpering like a child. Unholstering his Colt 45, Brian drew the automatic, cocked the hammer, and raised it to his brow. Before he could pull the trigger, the overweight zombie stepped up, grabbed Brian's pistol hand, and pushed it aside. Brian looked up at the zombie, his eyes wide and vacant. He didn't even cry out when the zombie bent over and clamped its teeth onto Brian's lips. Johnny observed Brian's breakdown and fought back one of his own. He moved closer to the others. "Sam, what do we do now?" Sam ejected the empty magazine from his AR-15 and inserted a full one. "We fight our way out." David and Johnny picked the 2 zombies nearest them and advanced. They opened fire, hoping to blast a path to safety. Johnny emptied 5 rounds in succession from his Remington A-bolt into the chest of a male zombie wearing a Boy Scout Master's uniform. The buckshot peppered its chest and ripped portions of decayed flesh out of its back, yet the Scoutmaster's zombie still advanced, reaching out to grasp its prey. Johnny waited until it closed to within a few feet and breached another round, only to find he was out of ammunition. He tried to retreat, but the Scoutmaster zombie clasped his shirt and dragged itself onto him. Johnny held up the rifle in front of the zombie, blocking it from getting too close. The zombie pushed against the rifle in a hunger-induced frenzy and knocked Johnny off balance. The 2 tumbled backwards onto the leaves. When they hit, the zombie's teeth sank into Johnny's shoulder. Johnny used the rifle to push it away, screaming as the chunk of flesh tore off between the zombie's clenched teeth. Before he could roll over and escape, 2 other zombies fell upon him. In the meantime, David aimed his rifle at a zombie in a country road crew uniform and began firing. Each bullet tore away a portion of skull and brain until, with the final shot, the remnants of its head were blasted away. Decapitated, the zombie continued forward, though it blindly steered away from David. David backed away, waiting for a chance to run, and bumped into something. Turning around, David stared at the wader zombie. It glared at him, bits of Ned dangling out of its mouth. With an animalistic growl, the zombie plunged its teeth into David's face. As the undead closed in around them, Sam watched and learned. Zombies couldn't be stopped, but maybe they could be immobilized. They can't eat you if they can't reach you. He lowered the barrel of his AR-15 and aimed at the leg of the zombie closest to him, a once gangly hunter whose beard and mustache were caked with gore. Sam squeezed the trigger several times until its leg was severed just above the knee. The zombie toppled to one side and sprawled onto the ground. Sam jumped over the zombie as it flailed around. He ran a few feet before spinning around and calling to Buck. "Shoot out their legs, it'll slow them down." 4 zombies were closing in on Buck from each side. Buck lowered his 12-gauge shotgun and blew off the leg of the zombie in front of him. It hopped around unsteadily on its one good leg. Buck went to run, but a second zombie grabbed him from behind, wrapping a partially fingerless hand around his neck. It pulled Buck against its chest and ripped into his neck with its teeth, tugging at his flesh and muscles. The third and fourth zombies joined the feeding frenzy, one grabbing Buck's right arm, the other dropping to its knees to gnaw on his leg. Buck's anguished scream turned into a gurgle as blood poured down his throat. Sam turned to run, but his left leg was held in place. He fell over, wrenching his ankle in the process. Looking down, he saw that the intruder who died at their campfire had come back to life. Lowering the barrel of his AR-15, Sam fired 3 rounds, vaporizing its wrist. The hand still clutched to his ankle. Sam rolled onto his chest and scrambled to his feet. A bolt of pain shot up his left leg, so intense he nearly toppled over. Steadying himself, he assessed the situation. Sam was the only one still alive, and uneaten. All around him, the zombies knelt by his friends, feasting on them as if they were a nightmare buffet at Shoney's. For a moment, Sam thought he would lose grip on his sanity as he listened to the slurping of flesh being torn from bones, to the chewing and gnawing, to the groans of satisfaction as these things sated their hunger. As horrifying as it sounded, Sam realised it also signified his good luck. These things were so busy feeding on his friends they ignored him except for those 2 zombies approaching from where their pickup stood, and they were still several yards away. Despite the throbbing in his ankle, Sam crouched and aimed his AR-15 at the first zombie and fired 3 shots in rapid succession, shattering both its knees. The zombie teetered to one side and tumbled over. Switching targets to the second zombie, he fired 4 more shots, blowing off both its legs. It collapsed face first onto the ground. With the path clear, Sam could now escape. That was when he noticed the deathly silence that had fallen over the campsite. Slowly turning his head, he saw 11 pairs of undead eyes staring in his direction, their attention having been drawn to him by the gunshots. It was as if they had only just realised his presence. There were no emotions in their expressions, just a collective recognition that they all saw the same thing: fresh meat. As one, the zombies lumbered to their feet and staggered towards him. Sam hobbled away as fast as he could, but only made it as far as the pickup trucks before the throbbing in his ankle became too intense for him to continue. He leaned against the bed of Johnny's Dodge as he tried to figure out his next move. With his twisted ankle, the best he could do was hop on one foot, which meant if his luck held out, he might make it a few hundred yards before the zombies caught up with him. He thought about taking one of the trucks, but he had rode up with Brian and the keys for the other trucks were somewhere amongst the pile of gore that used to be his hunting buddies. That left only one alternative. Limping over to Johnny's trailer, Sam lowered the twin ramps, crawled up into the bed and mounted the John Deere. Thankfully, Johnny had backed the tractor up onto the trailer, so rolling off would be easy. Sam started the 25 horsepower engine which turned over on the first try. The Scoutmaster zombie reached the trailer first, slowly climbing one of the twin ramps. Sam shifted into drive and accelerated. The tractor lurched forward and down the ramp, the front wheels digging into the Scoutmaster zombie and pushing it down. The tractor jerked to the left as the front wheel rolled over the zombie, coming dangerously close to tipping over. Sam leaned to the right as far as he could to counterbalance the tilt. Finally, the rear wheel rolled over the zombie and the tractor pulled onto solid ground. And into a swarm of a dozen of the living dead. The tractor crashed into 6 of the zombies, momentarily slowed against their weight. Dead hands clawed at him. Hungry mouths strained to take a bite out of him. Sam slammed his foot down on the accelerator and steered right. For a moment, he feared the tractor would stall. Then slowly, the tractor gained traction and began pushing through the zombies, cutting them down like stalks of wheat. The John Deere swung to the right and pulled away. The zombies followed, but soon fell behind. Rolling past the pickup trucks, Sam steered the Dondo onto the dirt road and headed for town. Sheriff Burford Wiggins pushed open the office door and began talking before he even entered the room. Okay, what's so damn important that you had to call me in on a Saturday night? Where do you want me to begin? Andy stood up to greet his boss, taking a stack of notes from off his desk. Despite his frazzled expression, he was still organised. Started about 2 hours ago and hasn't stopped since. First Junior arrested Sam Grodin out on the Lake Road, who was riding a tractor and ranting about his hunting party being eaten. Eaten? Andy shook his head in frustration. Sam stunk of beer, so Junior booked him on a DUI and tossed him in the drunk tank to sleep it off. Is that it? You wish. Andy thumbed through the notes. We've gotten calls from families whose kids haven't returned from a Boy Scout outing near the lake. They were supposed to be home before dusk. We also received reports about trouble up at Lover's Point, as well as a disturbance at the campground. Old Man Johnson called about 10 minutes ago complaining about someone bothering his cows, and that doesn't even include half a dozen missing persons reports we've received. I've already dispatched 2 units to Lover's Point and 2 to the campground. That's when I ran out of units, which is why I called you in. Shit. Bufford removed his Stetson and placed it on the counter. He used his hand to flatten down his comb over.
Alright, calling Curtis and sending him out to Old Man Johnson's. There's probably just some college kids horsing around, and I don't want Johnson shooting them. I'll go check out the lake and see if I can find those Boy Scouts. Roger that. Buffett placed his Stetson back on his head. This is gonna be a hell of a long night.